Beverly Albright pressed her forehead against the cool, smooth pane of her living room window. The late afternoon sun slanted harshly across her unnaturally green, chemically perfected lawn. It cast long, distorted shadows from the meticulously pruned Japanese maples. Shadows that seemed to crawl with insidious intent towards the house 2 doors down. 3:47 p.m. She checked the minimalist clock on her mantelpiece again, its silent sweep mocking her impatience. Her lips thinned into a bloodless line, tight with disapproval. An hour. They'd been at it, carrying on, disrupting the peace, for over an hour now. A short, sharp sigh escaped her lips, an exhalation of tightly wound impatience and simmering resentment. The shadows outside seemed to deepen, mirroring the darkness coalescing within her, urging her towards the inevitable action. Respectable people would be winding down by now, showing consideration. Across the street, partially visible through a strategically maintained gap in her dense privet hedge, the Rodriguez backyard pulsed with an energy she found viscerally offensive. Too much life. Far too much noise. Far too many people. People who didn't fit. People who didn't belong. Not really. Not in the quiet, orderly, predictable vision of Riverwood Meadows she held sacred. The vision she fought tirelessly, thanklessly, to preserve on the HOA board against the rising tide of change. She caught jarring glimpses, bright, almost garish flashes of colorful clothing, unfamiliar faces with expressions too animated, men gesturing emphatically near a smoking grill that sent unwelcome odors wafting towards her property line, women moving with a loud, unladylike confidence, children darting across the lawn like uncontrolled, shrieking projectiles. It wasn't a simple family gathering, her increasingly agitated mind insisted, twisting perception through the warped lens of prejudice. It was an invasion, a brazen display, a flagrant disregard for the neighborhood's established character, its hard-won tranquility. The lengthening shadows stretching across her own perfect lawn seemed to nod in agreement, whispering justifications, urging her towards the necessary corrective action. It was her duty, her unpleasant, but essential duty to restore order. A quick, vibrant snapshot of that perceived chaos, viewed without Beverly's filter, might have revealed something entirely different, entirely normal, entirely American. In its beautifully blended way, Police Chief Miguel Rodriguez, Mike to his family, his familia, stood near the large, smoking grill, momentarily stripped of his uniform and the immense weight of his office. Clad in comfortable shorts and a faded university t-shirt, he was laughing heartily. Genuinely, as his Tio Jorge, the family's self-proclaimed grill master emeritus, dramatically brandished a pair of long-handled tongs while recounting a fishing story that grew exponentially more unbelievable with each retelling. The very air hummed with life, thick and sweet with the irresistible aroma of grilling chorizo sausages spitting fat onto the coals, citrus and garlic marinated carne asada sizzling invitingly, and the subtle, sweet perfume of onions and multicolored bell peppers softening alongside them. Nearby, his Tia Elena and Tia Sofia were locked in a spirited, mock-argumentative debate, a decades-long tradition, over the precise, non-negotiable amount of fresh cilantro required for the perfect pico de gallo, their hands moving constantly, chopping, mixing, tasting, their voices overlapping in a warm, familiar cacophony. Younger cousins, fueled by sugar and sunshine, chased giggling toddlers across the soft grass, their shrieks pure, unadulterated delight, entirely devoid of malice or menace. From a portable speaker placed discreetly on the patio table, salsa music played, vibrant rhythms, cheerful melodies, at a volume loud enough for enjoyment but considerate enough not to dominate the adjacent properties. Mike, ever conscious of neighborhood dynamics even off duty, had checked the level himself earlier. It was a scene woven from the most ordinary, most precious threads of family connection, unconditional love, abundant food, shared history whispered in Spanish and English, noisy, unrestrained joy. It was a vital anchor, grounding Mike against the immense, often crushing pressures and isolating nature of his role as the city's police chief. These moments were his lifeline back to himself. He'd chosen Riverwood Meadows deliberately, years ago, precisely because it was a neighborhood in flux. He saw its transition from historically white, middle-class roots to something more diverse, more reflective of the complex, multifaceted city he served, as a strength, not a threat. He genuinely believed in community policing, not just as a strategy, but as a philosophy. He believed in building bridges, fostering trust, living amongst the people he was sworn to protect, sharing their streets, their concerns, their aspirations. He poured relentless energy into his work, implementing comprehensive implicit bias training long before it became a national buzzword, increasing foot patrols and community engagement officers in historically underserved neighborhoods, holding regular, sometimes contentious, town hall meetings where he listened more than he spoke, championing transparency initiatives that sometimes made his own officers uncomfortable, but which he knew were essential for legitimacy. But progress, especially against deeply ingrained resistance, was agonizingly slow. And that resistance often lurked just beneath the manicured surfaces of neighborhoods like Riverwood Meadows, frequently channeled, amplified, and weaponized through the Homeowners Association, an entity often dominated, as it was here, by longtime residents like Beverly Albright, who clung fiercely, desperately, to an idealized, exclusionary past that perhaps never truly existed. Mike knew of Beverly. He knew her reputation all too well. The constant stream of petty complaints about garbage bins, left out an hour past the arbitrary deadline, about lawn ornaments deemed tacky or inappropriate, about children's bicycles left momentarily unattended on driveways. He knew about the whispers, the exasperated eye rolls, the muttered nickname, HOA Karen, that followed her wake. He knew her focus had increasingly, uncomfortably, narrowed in recent years, often targeting newer families, particularly families of color, finding fault with everything from their landscaping choices too ethnic, perhaps, to the spices used in their cooking that drifted offensively, in her view, across property lines, to the number of guests they hosted. She possessed a remarkable, chilling ability to perceive nefarious intent, disorder, or violation in the most mundane activities, especially when those activities involved people who didn't look, sound, or live exactly like her. She hadn't directly confronted Mike, challenging the city's police chief, even for someone as self-assured as Beverly, carried obvious risks. But he'd felt her critical gaze during neighborhood walks, sensed her disapproval radiating like a cold front from 2 houses down. He knew the subtle, chilling effect her constant scrutiny had on some residents, fostering an atmosphere of low-grade anxiety and discouraging spontaneous community interaction. She was a cold pocket in the otherwise warm fabric of the neighborhood. Suddenly, Mike's personal cell phone, tucked securely into the pocket of his shorts, vibrated discreetly. He excused himself from Tio Jorge's escalating fishtail. Stepping slightly away from the grill's heat, he glanced down at the screen. A text message from Sergeant Davies, a trusted, level-headed veteran currently on duty at the main dispatch center. Mike's brow furrowed slightly as he read, "Chief, heads up. Getting an unusual 911 call. Caller reporting alleged gang activity. Possible weapons cited. Potential drug smell at 214 Willow Lane. That's next door or two down from you, right? Caller sounds highly agitated, maybe unreliable, but hitting multiple keywords for mandatory priority response. Standard units rolling. Proceeding W caution per protocol. Just wanted you aware, ASAP. Mike felt a cold knot tighten instantly in his stomach. 214 Willow Lane. His address. The call wasn't from Beverly's house at 218, it was about his house, almost certainly reported by her. He glanced sharply across the street towards her house. He saw it, a distinct flicker of movement behind the pristine, slightly parted blinds. She was watching. Alleged gang activity. Weapons cited. Drug smell. At his family barbecue. Directed at his aunts, his uncles, his cousins, his children. It had to be Beverly. Maliciously fabricating a dangerous scenario. Using the system, he felt a surge of pure, cold anger. Quickly, professionally suppressed. Davies was right. Those keywords, those accusations, however baseless, would automatically trigger a significant, unavoidable response based on established protocols designed to protect officers and the public in potentially volatile situations. He quickly typed back a reply. Acknowledged. Davies. Standing by. Location is my private residence. Family gathering in progress. Confirming no criminal activity. Report is almost certainly a malicious false complaint. Likely bias motivated. Advise responding units accordingly. Emphasize officer safety but extreme caution assessment. He hit send, hoping desperately the clarifying information would reach the responding officers quickly enough to de-escalate the situation before uniforms arrived on scene. Hoping protocol allowed for that crucial reassessment based on his word. But he knew the system. He ran the system. And he knew that once certain flags were raised, certain wheels were set in motion, the momentum could be terrifyingly difficult to halt, even for the chief. Across the street, Beverly Albright's heart hammered against her ribs like a frantic bird trapped in a cage of her own making. Her mouth felt suddenly dry, coated with a chalky film of adrenaline. Her palms were damp against the smooth plastic of her cordless phone. But her voice, when she spoke into the receiver to the comm, professional 911 dispatcher on the other end, was a carefully crafted instrument of rising panic. Honed perhaps by years of practice complaining about lesser infractions. Yes, 214 Willow Lane, Riverwood Meadows. There's a large group, maybe 30, 40 people. They look like gang members. Her hand tightened its grip on the phone, her short, manicured nails digging into the plastic casing, leaving small white crescent moons, invisible markers of her escalating agitation and commitment to the lie. Very loud arguing. It sounds aggressive, mostly in Spanish. I can't understand most of it, but the tone. It sounds angry, a blatant, calculated falsehood. The predominant sounds drifting across the lawns were undeniably laughter and animated. Friendly conversation. I think I saw weapons. Her voice trembled slightly, a masterful touch of feigned fear. Someone near the back fence. He tucked something shiny, metallic, into his waistband. It looked like a gun. I'm sure it was. Another fabrication, conjured entirely from shadow, distance, and her pre-existing suspicion. And the smell, she continued, piling on the inflammatory details. There's smoke, yes, from the grill, but something else. It's not just barbecue, it smells. Chemical, acrid, maybe drugs. Burning something illegal. She layered falsehood upon falsehood, each lie designed to escalate the perceived threat level. painting a vivid, terrifying picture of imminent danger for the dispatcher, dutifully logging the information. They're spilling out into the street now, some of the younger men, looking menacing, blocking traffic. It feels like it could explode any second. Please, her voice cracked convincingly. You have to. Send officers immediately. Right away. I don't feel safe. My neighbors aren't safe. She ended the call, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. A tremor ran through her, a mixture of illicit, thrilling power and a deep, buried frisson of actual fear, not of the Rodriguez family, but perhaps of the magnitude of the forces she had just deliberately unleashed. She had done it. She had set the wheels in motion. Order would be restored. Her version of order. Mike had just pocketed his phone. The unease from Davy's text, settling heavily in his gut despite his attempt to project calm. He forced a smile for his Tio Orge, who was now miming the enormous size of the mythical fish that got away when the sound began. Subtle at first, a faint, high-pitched whine on the edge of hearing, then rapidly swelling, multiplying, converging, sirens. Not the single, melancholic wail of an ambulance heading towards a medical emergency. Not the brief chirp of a patrol car on a routine stop. This was the layered, urgent, insistent chorus of multiple police units approaching his street, his house, at high speed. Too many units, Mike thought again. The words echoing Davy's text, his stomach plummeting. Far too many for a simple noise complaint investigation. She actually did it. She escalated it. Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing in a nauseating flux. The cheerful salsa music sputtered, then abruptly cut off as someone, sensing the encroaching emergency, hit the pause button on the speaker. Laughter died mid-peal, choked off in throats. Conversations trailed away into stunned, apprehensive silence. Heads snapped towards the street, eyes wide, searching, reflecting a confusion that quickly curdled into dawning apprehension. His Tia Isabella gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest, her face paling beneath her sun-kissed complexion. The children, acutely sensitive barometers of adult mood, abruptly stopped their games, freezing like small, startled deer caught in headlights, their playful expressions dissolving into wide-eyed fear as the sirens grew impossibly loud. Each rising and falling pulse of the approaching sirens felt like a physical blow, a hammer striking against the fragile membrane of the peaceful afternoon. How close were they now? 30 seconds, 20, less. Each second seemed to tick down with agonizing slowness, yet simultaneously compressed into an unbearable, frantic countdown towards what? What level of response had her lies triggered? Then they were there, bursting onto the tranquil suburban scene with jarring force. 3.0. 4 marked city police cruisers materialized at the end of the block, tires squealing almost imperceptibly on the hot asphalt as they executed practiced, strategic positioning, blocking Mike's driveway, angling across the street, effectively creating a contained, tactical perimeter around the front of his property. Their rooftop lights pulsed relentlessly, silently screaming emergency, slashing across the familiar scene, the cheerful tablecloths, the scattered lawn toys, the faces frozen in disbelief, painting everything in harsh, urgent strobes of red and blue, transforming the peaceful backyard gathering into a potential confrontation zone. Doors flew open almost simultaneously. Uniformed officers emerged, their movements economical, cautious, radiating a heightened tactical alertness that sent a fresh wave of fear through Mike. Hands automatically hovered near their service weapons. Eyes, shielded behind regulation sunglasses, scanned the crowd in the backyard, the crowd composed entirely of Mike's family, with overt suspicion. "Stay calm, everyone," Mike commanded again, his voice louder this time, needing to cut through the rising tide of fear and confusion, projecting an authority born equally of instinct and profession. "Stay back. Por favor, stay back. Let me handle this." He felt dozens of pairs of frightened eyes fixed on him as he walked deliberately, measuredly, away from the perceived safety of his family gathered near the patio, towards the edge of his lawn, towards the line of officers, towards the inexplicable, infuriating violation unfolding on his own doorstep. Sergeant Miller, the 20-year veteran Mike, knew well and trusted implicitly under normal circumstances, was the lead officer approaching him. Mike saw the exact moment of recognition dawn in Miller's experienced eyes, saw it followed instantly by a flicker of profound confusion, then a wave of visible, stomach-churning awkwardness and disbelief. Miller's hand, which had been instinctively, automatically near the grip of his sidearm upon exiting the vehicle based on the nature of the dispatch, dropped loosely, almost self-consciously, to his side. "Chief Rodriguez," Miller stammered, his usual professional composure momentarily, understandably fracturing under the sheer absurdity of the situation. "Sir, what the hell is the situation here?" "That's precisely what I was about to ask you." "Sergeant," Mike replied. His voice was remarkably level, tightly controlled, betraying none of the icy fury rapidly solidifying like a glacier beneath the surface. He'd consciously kept his posture non-threatening. His shoulders relaxed, despite the tension gripping him. His hands held open and visible at his sides. "Explain to me why 4 patrol units are responding Code 3. Lights and sirens blaring. To my private residence during my family barbecue." Miller flushed deeply, a tide of red creeping up his neck, his discomfort palpable even from several feet away. He cleared his throat, avoiding Mike's direct gaze for a moment. "Sir, dispatch received a 911 call, multiple reports embedded within the call, alleging a large disturbance, suspected gang affiliation involving attendees, possible illegal firearms cited, potential narcotics trafficking or use occurring on the premises." Miller recited the litany of accusations, his voice strained. Caller stated the situation felt extremely volatile, potentially dangerous, and was rapidly escalating towards imminent violence. Gang affiliation, illegal firearms, narcotics trafficking at his home, against his family. The specific, fabricated accusations struck Mike with the force of physical blows, each lie more outrageous, more poisonous than the last. He didn't need to ask who the caller was. He glanced again across the street, his eyes drawn magnetically towards Beverly Albright's window. He saw the curtain twitch again, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. She was watching, listening. "Gang activity," Mike repeated, the phrase tasting like ash and bile in his mouth. He made a slow, deliberate sweep with his hand, gesturing towards his backyard, towards his aunts still frozen near the kitchen island, towards his uncles standing stunned by the grill, towards his bewildered cousins trying to comfort the crying toddlers, towards the entire tableau of multi-generational family life suddenly framed by flashing police lights. "Does this appear to constitute gang activity to you, Sergeant? Does my 70-year-old Tia Isabella, who makes the best tamales in the Tri-County area, look like a hardened gang member? My 5-year-old nephew clutching his teddy bear? My cousin Maria, who teaches honors calculus at the high school? My uncle Carlos, who runs a successful landscaping business and volunteers at the church food pantry?" Sergeant Miller's gaze followed Mike's gesture, his eyes taking in the scene with a dawning horror. The bewildered, frightened faces, the remnants of a perfectly normal, peaceful family gathering, half-eaten plates of food, colorful napkins scattered, lawn chairs arranged in conversational circles. The utter, stark lack of anything remotely resembling the violent, criminal enterprise described in the 911 report. He looked back at his chief. Mike took a slow, deliberate breath, visibly clenching his jaw, his eyes hardening, turning glacial. The fury was no longer suppressed. It radiated from him in palpable waves. Shame washed over Miller's face, hot and stinging. "No, sir," Miller said quietly, his voice heavy with embarrassment and professional chagrin. "It looks like a family barbecue, Chief. A perfectly peaceful one." "The complainant, Sergeant?" Mike asked, his voice dangerously soft now, low and resonant, demanding the formal confirmation he already possessed. Miller hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then consulted the mobile data terminal readout. Dispatch logged the originating call from Beverly Albright, address 218 Willow Lane. Mike nodded slowly, grimly, just as he'd suspected since Davy's warning text. The confirmation landed like a final, heavy stone. "All right, Sergeant." Mike's voice regained its crisp command tone. "Instruct your officers to stand down immediately. Secure the scene. Maintain positions for now if protocol dictates, but stand down. All units. There is no threat here. There is no crime in progress. There is no disturbance, other than the significant one created by this unnecessary, large-scale response." His voice hardened, each word sharp and distinct. "This is my home. This is my family. And we are the victims of a malicious hoax report. A phony emergency call-out, almost certainly motivated by racial and ethnic bias." He turned abruptly, his entire focus shifting like a laser beam across the street. He saw the curtain move again, more furtively this time, snatched back quickly. "She knows I know." He walked with measured, deliberate steps off his own lawn, across the quiet pavement, rendered tense and surreal by the pulsing emergency lights, stopping directly on the public sidewalk in front of Beverly Albright's immaculate, sterile house. The house felt like a fortress of judgment. Sergeant Miller and another younger officer followed, maintaining a respectful but clearly observant distance, their roles instantly shifting from responding to a potential threat to witnessing their chief confront his accuser. Mike waited, silent, unmoving, his very presence on her sidewalk a potent accusation. The air crackled with unspoken tension. After a long, breathless moment, the pristine white front door opened just a few inches, and Beverly Albright peered out, her face pale beneath its usual mask of rigid self-importance, her carefully constructed composure visibly fraying around the edges like worn fabric. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked, her voice slightly breathless, high-pitched, pointedly directing her question towards Sergeant Miller, deliberately, pointedly avoiding Mike's direct gaze. "Ma'am," Mike said, his voice cutting through her attempted deflection. It was calm, steady, almost conversational, yet it carried the unmistakable weight of his office, the inherent authority that made her visibly flinch, her eyes darting nervously towards him despite herself. "I am Police Chief Rodriguez. I believe you placed a 911 call just minutes ago regarding alleged activities occurring at my home." Beverly's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. She swallowed hard. Yes. I reported a disturbance, loud noise, potentially illegal behavior taking place. It's my civic duty as a resident to report such things." "Your duty," Mike interrupted, taking a single, deliberate step onto the edge of her perfectly edged concrete walkway, closing the distance between them slightly, forcing her to meet his gaze. His voice remained low, but intensified, each word carrying a distinct edge. "Or your prejudice, Miss Albright. Let's be specific, shall we? What exact alleged criminal behavior did you personally witness? Describe the weapons you claimed you saw. Detail the drug use you reported smelling just moments ago to the emergency dispatcher. He leaned in almost imperceptibly, his presence filling her doorway. Or did you simply see a gathering of Latino individuals enjoying a family event in their own backyard, making noise that perhaps offended your delicate sensibilities, and decide to invent a dangerous criminal scenario? Did you decide to call in armed police officers based on nothing more substantial than your own racist assumptions and cultural stereotypes? Beverly bristled, falling back on the shaky bastion of indignant defense, her voice rising, becoming shrill. How dare you accuse me of such things? I was concerned, genuinely concerned. It was chaotic over there. There were so many people, unfamiliar people roaming the neighborhood. The noise was excessive. The undesirable element they attract. This is supposed to be a quiet, respectable neighborhood, Chief. And you should know that. This is my family, Miss Albright, Mike stated, his voice dropping lower again, each word precise, deliberate, heavy with meaning. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my children's grandparents, hardworking American citizens, teachers, nurses, small business owners, veterans, taxpayers, your neighbors. His eyes dot cold now, locked onto hers, holding her gaze relentlessly. And yes, we are Latino. We are celebrating our culture, our family bonds. Does our mere presence, our speaking Spanish, our music, our enjoying food together in our own home, automatically equate to criminal behavior or an undesirable element in your mind? He paused, letting the silence stretch, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic crackle of a police radio. You, knowingly, deliberately, filed a false police report detailing dangerous, felonious activity, fabricating claims of gang presence, illegal weapons, narcotics, at the private residence of this city's sitting chief of police. You lied, repeatedly, and with malice, to sworn emergency dispatchers, manipulating the system. You incited a high-priority, multi-unit police response, diverting critical resources from potential genuine emergencies elsewhere in this city. You placed my family, including elderly relatives and small children, and my own uniformed officers in potential danger based entirely on your calculated fabrications. Mike's voice was barely a whisper now, freighted with a fury so cold it burned. You wasted significant city resources, taxpayer money, and you did all of this, apparently, because you couldn't tolerate the sight and sound of a Latino family having a simple Sunday barbecue in their own backyard. Beverly's face crumpled completely. The carefully constructed facade of civic concern shattered like cheap glass, revealing the raw, unfiltered panic beneath. The full, catastrophic reality of her actions, the sheer magnitude of her miscalculation, seemed to finally crash down upon her with crushing force. She hadn't just called the cops on annoying neighbors she disliked. She had filed a demonstrably false, racially charged emergency report alleging violent criminal activity against the city's highest-ranking law enforcement official and his entire family at his own home, triggering a significant, resource-intensive police response based entirely on lies. The potential consequences, legal jeopardy, public disgrace, financial ruin, were suddenly, terrifyingly, undeniably real. I didn't realize. I didn't know it was your house, she stammered weakly, grasping at the pathetic, irrelevant, and ultimately meaningless excuse. And would that make it acceptable if it wasn't my house? Mike shot back instantly, his voice sharp with undisguised contempt. Would it be acceptable to terrorize any family, regardless of their profession or status, with false accusations and an armed police response based solely on their ethnicity, their language, or the color of their skin. Is that the kind of community you truly believe Riverwood Meadows should be? Miss Albright, is that the standard you claim you are so diligently upholding? He turned abruptly, dismissing her, facing Sergeant Miller directly, his expression hardening back into unequivocal professional command. Mike inhaled sharply, his jaw visibly tight, his eyes like chips of obsidian ice. Sergeant, I want the complete, unedited 911 recording pulled immediately and preserved as evidence. I want Miss Albright placed under arrest, right now, for filing a false police report resulting in an emergency response, a felony under state statute. You will advise the district attorney's office upon booking that we will be seeking potential hate crime enhancements based on the clear evidence of racial bias motivating this fabricated report. I want a full, thorough, and expedited investigation initiated immediately by our Internal Affairs Division and the Departmental Hate Crimes Unit. They will report their findings directly to Deputy Chief Williams to ensure absolute integrity and avoid any appearance of conflict. I am formally recusing myself from any direct oversight of Miss Albright's criminal case. However, I expect it handled meticulously, impartially, and entirely by the book. Yes, Chief. Sergeant Miller acknowledged grimly, his face set. He signaled his partner, who had been standing by, to proceed with the arrest. As the two uniformed officers stepped purposefully onto her pristine lawn, Beverly Albright finally, completely lost control, abandoning any lingering pretense of composure or dignity. She began to shriek, her voice high-pitched and ragged with terror and disbelief. "No! Stop! Get away from me! You can't arrest me. I was scared. I was only trying to protect the neighborhood. I have rights. This is retaliation. It's only because he's the chief. He's abusing his power. Somebody help me. Film this." Her frantic protests were utterly futile. The officers calmly, professionally informed her she was under arrest, recited her Miranda rights amidst her continued screaming, and efficiently placed her hands behind her back. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed unnaturally in the suddenly quiet street. Neighbors had emerged from their houses now in greater numbers, drawn by the sirens, the prolonged confrontation, and now the unmistakable sounds of arrest. Many held up smartphones, recording the scene unfolding on Beverly's perfect lawn. Beverly Albright, the self-appointed guardian of Riverwood Meadows' purity, the woman who wielded community regulations and anonymous complaints like weapons, was being arrested. The flashing red and blue police lights pulsed across her tear-streaked, terrified face, capturing her utter humiliation for posterity. The irony was stark, brutal, and undeniable. Her downfall was swift, public, and self-inflicted. The footage began spreading like wildfire across local social media feeds before the first official news van even arrived on the scene. Mike walked slowly, heavily, back across the street to his own yard, the earlier lightness in his step completely gone, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. His shoulders felt slumped under an invisible weight. The festive party atmosphere had completely evaporated, leaving behind a heavy, stunned silence, thick with unspoken emotions. His family gathered around him near the now cold grill, their expressions a complex, heartbreaking mixture of residual fear, simmering anger, profound relief, and bewildered concern. The children were crying quietly, clinging to their parents. He pulled his tia Isabella into a tight hug, murmuring reassurances in Spanish. He spoke briefly to his other elderly relatives, their faces etched with worry. Then he switched to English, addressing the whole group. His voice thick with emotion, he rarely allowed himself to show, especially not in his professional life. "I am so deeply, profoundly sorry that this happened," he said, his gaze sweeping over their beloved, familiar faces, now shadowed by the afternoon's events. This woman, her prejudice, her intolerance, her hatred, she chose to poison our day, our celebration, our home. He straightened, his voice gaining strength. "But we will not let her actions define us or diminish us. We did absolutely nothing wrong. We were celebrating family, celebrating our heritage, celebrating life. There is no shame in that. There is never, ever any shame in who we are." He turned briefly to the officers still remaining on scene, Sergeant Miller and his partner, completing their initial reports. He thanked them quietly for their professionalism under extremely difficult and awkward circumstances, but reiterated firmly that a comprehensive, top-to-bottom review of the entire incident, from the initial 911 call handling and threat assessment protocols to the multi-unit response decision, would be conducted immediately. Starting tomorrow morning, lessons needed to be learned, procedures needed to be improved. Then, as the first official news crews began setting up tripods and cameras on the sidewalk just beyond his property line, Mike took another deep, steadying breath. He smoothed his T-shirt, straightened his shoulders, and prepared to face the inevitable barrage of questions. The probing lenses, the glare of the public eye. He would speak not just as Police Chief Rodriguez responding clinically to a neighborhood incident, but as Miguel Rodriguez, a son, a nephew, a cousin, a father, defending his family, his culture, and the fundamental principles of justice, equality, and basic human decency he had dedicated his entire life and career to upholding. His statement to the press later that evening, delivered from the steps of police headquarters, was calm, measured, yet infused with a palpable emotion that resonated deeply with many viewers. He described the peaceful nature of the family gathering, unequivocally condemned the false, fabricated, and malicious nature of the 911 report, and spoke directly, powerfully, about the trauma inflicted upon his family, particularly the children and elderly relatives who had witnessed the armed police response. He denounced racial profiling and the dangerous weaponization of emergency services fueled by bigotry, calling such actions intolerable and unacceptable in his city. He affirmed his commitment to a thorough, impartial investigation into Beverly Albright's actions, handled independently due to his recusal, and simultaneously pledged a rigorous review of departmental procedures to prevent similar incidents based on potentially biased or false reporting in the future. He concluded his statement with quiet pride, speaking about his family's deep roots in the community, their long history of contributions as citizens, and their fundamental human right, shared by all residents, to exist peacefully, celebrate their cultural heritage, and live without being stereotyped, targeted, or endangered based on prejudice. The story, predictably, ignited a media firestorm, resonating far beyond the quiet streets of Riverwood Meadows. HOA Karen, arrested after falsely reporting police chief's Latino family, BBQ, as alleged gang activity, became a dominant, recurring headline across national news cycles and social media platforms for days. Beverly Albright's tearful, undignified arrest footage went viral, transforming her overnight into an internet meme, a potent symbol of petty tyranny, unchecked privilege, and virulent racism spectacularly backfiring. While there was widespread, almost universal condemnation of her specific actions, the incident also inevitably forced a raw, uncomfortable, and much-needed national conversation about deeper, more complex systemic issues. the potential for implicit bias within 911 dispatch centers and emergency response systems, the significant challenges police departments face when responding to potentially prejudiced or deliberately fabricated reports while still ensuring public safety, the often unchecked and easily abused power dynamics within homeowners associations, and the persistent, insidious reality of racial profiling experienced daily by minority communities, even, starkly, by those individuals who have achieved the highest levels of authority within the system itself. Mike found himself navigating an intensely complex and demanding aftermath. He received an overwhelming outpouring of public and private support from diverse community leaders, civil rights organizations, fellow law enforcement officials across the country appalled by the incident, and countless ordinary citizens simply disgusted by Beverly's blatant bigotry. But he also faced inevitable, sometimes critical, scrutiny. Some commentators and activists understandably questioned whether the immediate arrest and subsequent charges against Beverly Albright would have been pursued as swiftly or vigorously if her target hadn't been the city's police chief himself. Mike acknowledged these valid concerns head-on in subsequent interviews, emphasizing the importance of his immediate recusal from her case and stressing the critical need for the independent investigation by units outside his direct command chain to be conducted with demonstrable impartiality and transparency, precisely to maintain public trust. The investigation into Beverly Albright, conducted meticulously by Internal Affairs and the Hate Crimes Unit, rapidly yielded a mountain of damning evidence. The 911 recordings starkly revealed her calculated lies, her deliberate use of inflammatory, racially coded language, and her manipulative performance of feigned panic. Investigators painstakingly documented her extensive history of complaints within Riverwood Meadows, uncovering through HOA records and corroborated by numerous now willing neighbor testimonies, a clear, undeniable pattern of disproportionately targeting minority residents for minor or entirely non-existent infractions. Digital forensics specialists uncovered emails, text messages, and social media posts further indicating her long-held prejudiced views, her resentment towards the neighborhood's changing demographics, and her specific animosity towards the Rodriguez family. The case against her for filing a false police report was overwhelming, and prosecutors moved forward confidently with the additional hate crime enhancements due to the explicit, abundant evidence of racial animus as the primary motivating factor behind the phony emergency call. Beverly Albright, abandoned by her former HOA allies, ostracized by her neighbors, and facing serious felony charges carrying potentially significant prison time, hired an expensive defense attorney. Their strategy attempted to frame her as a frightened, perhaps lonely and isolated woman, maybe overly zealous in her desire for neighborhood order, but ultimately motivated by misguided concern rather than malice. They vigorously argued against the hate crime enhancement, attempting to portray her inflammatory comments on the 911 call as mere misinterpretations fueled by panic, not prejudice. But the evidence, particularly the chilling clarity of the 911 recording itself, her documented history of biased complaints, and the sheer absurdity of her claims when contrasted with the reality of the peaceful family gathering, combined with the extremely high-profile nature of the case and the identity and position of the primary victim, left her defense team with very little room for effective maneuvering, facing the near certainty of conviction on all counts in a highly publicized trial, and likely staring down a much longer potential sentence if found guilty by a jury. Beverly eventually accepted a plea agreement negotiated between her counsel and the district attorney's office. She pleaded guilty to the primary felony charge of filing a false police report resulting in a major emergency response. Crucially, as part of the negotiated deal, she formally admitted to the bias motivation underlying the crime, accepting the hate crime enhancement, likely in exchange for the prosecution agreeing to recommend a sentence at the lower end of the potential range. At the sentencing hearing months later, the courtroom buzzed with media and public interest. The judge, known for her sharp legal mind and intolerance for abuses of power, delivered a stern, pointed rebuke before announcing the sentence, leaving no doubt about the court's view of Beverly Albright's actions. Miss Albright, the judge, began, her voice echoing slightly in the hushed room. Your actions on that Sunday afternoon were not born of legitimate civic concern, as your counsel has attempted to portray. They were born of deep-seated racial prejudice, a profound sense of entitlement, and a staggering arrogance. You perceived difference and immediately, baselessly, assumed danger. You witnessed innocent family celebration and deliberately, maliciously fabricated criminality. In doing so, you not only terrorized an innocent family enjoying their home, including vulnerable children and elderly individuals, but you also recklessly endangered the lives of the very police officers sworn to protect this community, including its chief, by sending them into a situation you falsely represented as volatile and potentially armed. You selfishly, maliciously weaponized the 911 system, a critical lifeline intended for genuine emergencies, for people in real peril, transforming it into a tool of personal harassment and racial intimidation. The judge paused, her gaze fixed on Beverly. The fact that your target happened to be the chief of police underscores the sheer audacity and recklessness of your behavior. But let me be unequivocally clear. The core offense, the racist assumptions that fueled your fear, the calculated lies you told to authorities, the deliberate inciting of a dangerous confrontation based on those lies would be equally reprehensible, equally illegal, equally deserving of punishment, regardless of the victim's identity or position in the community. This city, this state, and this court will not tolerate the use of emergency services as a vehicle for perpetuating racial hatred or personal vendettas. Beverly Albright received a sentence that reflected the severity of her crime and the acknowledged hate crime enhancement, 18 months incarceration in state prison. This was followed by 3 years of stringent supervised probation, which included mandatory participation in intensive anti-racism education programs and court-ordered psychological counseling, focusing specifically on bias recognition and anger management. She was ordered to pay significant fines and full restitution, covering the substantial cost incurred by the city for the unnecessary multi-unit police response she had triggered. A permanent restraining order was issued, barring her from any contact whatsoever with Chief Rodriguez or any member of his immediate family, and prohibiting her from residing within a 5-mile radius of their home upon her eventual release. Furthermore, due to the felony conviction demonstrating her unfitness for fiduciary or governance roles within a community association, legal avenues were pursued successfully to ensure she could never again hold a position of power within any HOA in the state. Coupled with the significant financial penalties levied, civil asset forfeiture proceedings were initiated against her primary residence and other substantial assets to ensure her financial obligations related to the crime were fully met. Her financial ruin was virtually assured, a direct consequence of her actions. Mike Rodriguez, true to his character, determined to bring something constructive out of the painful and deeply personal experience. He used the incident and the subsequent departmental review as a catalyst for meaningful, tangible change within his department and, through advocacy, in the city's emergency response systems. He spearheaded the implementation of enhanced, scenario-based training modules for all 911 dispatchers, focusing specifically on identifying potentially biased or manipulative callers, asking critical clarifying questions, and employing protocols for verifying information before automatically escalating response levels based solely on inflammatory keywords, especially in non-violent disturbance calls. He oversaw careful revisions to departmental protocols for responding to vaguely defined suspicious activity or disturbance calls, mandating more thorough initial assessment and verification steps, particularly when caller bias was suspected or indicated by call patterns. He also redoubled his already significant efforts in community outreach, using his family's story not for personal sympathy, but as a powerful, authentic tool to foster frank, sometimes difficult, but necessary dialogues about bias, policing. Community relations, and the shared responsibility of building stronger, safer, more inclusive neighborhoods for everyone. Life in Riverwood Meadows eventually settled into a new, more conscious normal. Beverly Albright's house stood empty for a long period during her incarceration, and the protracted financial proceedings related to restitution and forfeiture, eventually being sold to a young family eager to join the diverse community. The HOA board, populated by new members, operated with a newfound, if sometimes awkward and imperfect, public commitment to fostering genuine inclusivity and addressing resident concerns with fairness rather than reflexive judgment or prejudice. The Rodriguez family, though undeniably shaken and forever marked by the ordeal, remained strong, their bonds perhaps even closer, their continued presence in the neighborhood an unwavering symbol of resilience and belonging. They hosted another barbecue later that summer. It was a slightly quieter affair initially, the laughter perhaps a bit more subdued at first, the glances towards the street maybe a touch more frequent and guarded than before. But as the afternoon wore on, warmed by the sun and the comfort of familiar faces, the familiar rhythms returned. The irresistible aroma of carne asada and grilled sweet corn once again drifted on the warm breeze. Music played, conversation flowed, children chased each other across the lawn, their joyous shrieks reclaiming the space. One quiet evening a few days later, Mike sat on his porch swing, the strains of a long day easing from his shoulders, watching his youngest son, Mateo, now 6, carefully building a lopsided tower with colorful wooden blocks on the porch floor. Mateo suddenly looked up from his creation, his small face unusually serious, his brow furrowed in thought. "Papy," he asked, his voice hesitant, quiet. "Why were the police officers mad at our party that day? Was it because we were being too loud?" Mike felt a familiar pang in his chest, the echo of that afternoon's fear and confusion reflected in his son's innocent question. He pulled Mateo onto his lap, hugging him close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and boyish energy. "No, Mijo," he said softly, stroking his son's dark, unruly hair. "No, Kamako. The police officers weren't mad at us, or at our party. They came because one person, a neighbor who lives down the street, was feeling very unhappy inside, and maybe a little scared of things she didn't understand." He paused, choosing his words with care, wanting to be truthful without transferring adult bitterness. And because she was feeling that way, she told the police some untrue things on the phone. She made up a scary story because she didn't like our music, maybe, or because she didn't like seeing so many people laughing and having fun together. Sometimes, Mike continued gently, looking into Mateo's wide, questioning eyes. People let fear or unkind feelings make them do bad things. MIJO. Like telling lies that can hurt other people or scare them. It wasn't your fault, or our family's fault. or anyone at the party's fault at all. The police came. They saw the truth, that we were just having a happy family party, sharing food and love, and the person who told the lies got into trouble for breaking the important rule about always telling the truth, especially to the police. He held Mateo a little tighter, wanting to absorb any lingering fear. We are safe, Kamako. Our family is strong, and we love each other very much, and it's always okay for us to celebrate who we are, loudly and proudly, with music and laughter and joy. Understand? Mateo nodded slowly, leaning his head against his father's chest, the tension visibly easing from his small shoulders, seemingly reassured by the explanation, by the physical comfort, by the unwavering certainty in his father's voice. Mike looked out at the quiet street, the setting sun painting the evening sky in breathtaking hues of orange, pink, and purple. The fight against prejudice, he knew with a weary certainty, was a long, ongoing, exhausting battle, waged not just in high-stakes policy meetings and intensive training rooms, but in countless quiet conversations on front porches, in challenging everyday assumptions, in refusing to be silenced, and in stubbornly, joyfully celebrating family and heritage in the very face of hatred. Justice, in a legal sense, had been served in Beverly Albright's case, but the real, enduring work lay ahead. The work of ensuring such incidents became painful relics of the past, rather than recurring headlines fueling division and fear. And that work, he knew, started right here, in his home, in his neighborhood, in the heart of his community. One conversation, one connection, one stubbornly joyful barbecue at a time.